Two. Okay. So, hey everyone, my name is Jennifer Jackemeyer Khan. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the Outreach and Public Engagement Coordinator at Stamps Gallery, which is part of the Penny W. Stamps School of Art and Design at the University of Michigan. So before we get started, I want to let everyone know that we are recording our session this morning. So if you do not wish to be on the video recording, please turn off your video camera, which should be in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. You can do that. And then also while folks are talking, if you could just keep yourself on mute, that would be lovely as well. So I'm pleased to welcome you all here this morning for the virtual launch of the book Arrested Welcome, Hospitality in Contemporary Art by Irina Aristarkhova, with special guest artists, all of whom are featured in the book: Anna Pravachki, Faith Wilding, Kathy Hai, Mithu Sen, and Ken Aptekar. So thank you all to our distinguished guests for being here with us today. So before I turn it over to Irina, I want to give you a quick rundown of the event and then go over some housekeeping. Following Irina's introduction to the book, each of our guests will be giving remarks for 5 minutes. After the artists have presented, there will be remarks by Stamps Gallery. We'll then open it up to a public Q&A where we will take your questions through the chat. Feel free to post questions anytime throughout the event in the chat, but just note that we won't take any of those questions until after all of the remarks have been given. And then you can find a complete schedule of our event today posted in the chat for your reference. A few other items that we're putting in the chat for you right now is a link to where the video of this event will be available, a link to the University of Minnesota Press blog, where Irina will write a blog post in response to your questions and comments, which will be posted in mid-July. We're also posting a special code for 30% off if and when you would like to go and buy the book. There's also a link to the book's PDF available at Michigan Library's open access site. And we're also posting a link to where you can find more information about Stamps Gallery, its programs and exhibitions. So now, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Irina Aristarkhova, the author of Arrested Welcome, Hospitality in Contemporary Art.
Unmute myself. Can you all hear me well?
Yeah.
So here are my 5 minutes. Thank you all for being here, the Stamps Gallery of the University of Michigan for hosting this event, and everyone at the University of Minnesota Press for making this book a reality. 2 reasons for this virtual launch today in this new form for all of us. First, I saw Zakiya Mann Jackson's launch of her amazing book earlier this month, and I recommend everyone to check it out. The title is Becoming Human, Matter and Meaning in an Anti-Black World. Shout out to Zakiya. And since there is an open access digital version of my book, second, today's event seemed appropriate because so many of us will be working and teaching in hybrid or online setting using various platforms. And I'm learning now Minnesota's digital manifold platform, where the video from today will be made available. To introduce the book, I would like to say 2 things. First, that it comes out of my strong conviction that contemporary art practices offer alternative visions of being in the world. When I wrote my first book on hospitality, I critiqued the way in which it has not been sufficiently interrogated and unpacked as practice and tradition, which as much establishes hierarchies and inequalities as it promises alternatives to hostility and intolerance. The second book is inspired by artists that have brought me into the real world of practices, encounters, materialities, and presence, when welcoming becomes resistance, and that very hospitality traditions also have on those hierarchies and inequalities that existed so far. Far from considering welcome as a solution to all problems in uncritical, naive ways, In each chapter, I show how contemporary artists whom we are seeing today and their aesthetic decisions challenge our inherited practices that have long been prescribing who gets to be welcomed the most and who is seen unworthy of our welcome. Second, my book, I believe, is part of a growing number of texts that demonstrate their author's impatience. This impatience is with those approaches that are tightly loyal to the stubbornly and narrowly defined historiographical and philosophical canon. There is no question, of course, that I have benefited from revisionist histories and speculative fictions as a path to change. For me, however, it is a contemporary art that represents the time of change. Sorry, contemporary. And I'm getting into this notion of contemporary. Contemporaneity, in that sense, is not only a descriptor of a disciplinary location of my book, that is, in the contemporary aisle of the library versus, or the bookstore versus art of the 11th century, for example, but a testimony to the insistence on the urgency of now. I appreciated very much when someone wrote to me recently that they immediately thought about my book upon hearing on the news of a man in Washington, D.C., who sheltered over 70 of Black Lives Matter protesters in his home to protect them from imminent arrest by police. His name is Rahul Dubey. He demonstrated a kind of incredible, which one, in my book, I'm asking why we're not doing more of those things, but also impulsive hosting, similar to the story I opened the introduction with. However, this is not a celebration only. As incredible as his action was, the global news around the story that presented his action as transgressive are indicators of a larger problem, that what seems to be not a big deal in other circumstances becomes incredible and transgressive because hospitality has shrunk to an industry, a system for those who already feel entitled to and demand every welcome the world has to offer. I write about art practices that start from the mundane, everyday life decisions of seemingly low stakes hellos and smiles and waiting and opening the door as they get mobilized into the politics of hosting of human and non-human. Those events with realized or arrested welcome reveal ourselves to ourselves as much as the world to us and us to the world. That is why hospitality practice and contemporary art go together for me. I'm sharing this moment with artists, and I deeply thank you for your work and honored by your presence here today. I look forward to our conversation. Thank you all. And throughout this next hour, I will be looking at the chat. So please post your questions, those who are present here today, and we will start taking them after initial remarks. Thank you so much.
Okay, so let's move on to Anna. Thanks, Irina. Anna Pravach.
Thank you, Irina, so much for making all of this happen, for bringing us all together today, and for writing such an incredibly timely book. It feels timely on the larger scale and on a very personal scale. I feel incredibly honored and grateful to be part of the project. I would like to actually share the screen and just quickly show one of the videos that were part of my Documenta project. Here we go. Is this working? No. Are you able to see it? I don't hear anything.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So I was thinking that we could provide you with a website that is and
So, Vertuhi, how do you point out a flaw like spinach between teeth? Point out his flaw very discreetly and as soon as possible.
But how?
So this is one of my 6 videos that address these ideas of hospitality and etiquette and ameliorating the awkwardnesses and discomforts of interacting with people and just being a human being. And what was extraordinary to me reading your book is that, and now seeing this video after so many years, is that there's so much giggling in it, but actually working on this project, which turned out to be the most personal work I've ever made, was actually emotionally really, really difficult. And having Irina's support and insight then and now in retrospect, it feels incredibly, it completes the work, and it gives me also a much deeper understanding of how the work affected me and how the work operated for a larger audience. And so it's really interesting having this luxury of speaking to you over the years on this topic, and to kind of observe all the changes that have happened since has been really, really an incredible experience. So I don't know if I have more time, if I can show another video.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, should we see another video?
Yeah, let's do it.
Hey.
Vertuhi, how do we measure personal space?
Personal space is connected to a sense of privacy, and it varies on customs and social habits. You can roughly measure it 20 inches or 50 centimeters in or out at arm's distance.
So what is the polite thing to do if someone repeatedly keeps bumping you with your bag?
Turn around, smile sincerely, and to neutralize your negative feelings, say something nice. That's a nice pet.
So this is actually very timely, because you can use this line of, for social distancing. It applies pretty well in this context as well.
Great. Thank you, Anna. Okay, so we're going to move, oh, sorry, go ahead. So we're going to move over to Faith Wilding, who's next. So I think then Irina, are we going back over to you?
Anna said fantastically pertinent things about how Irina's work with us, for me it's been over years now, has been incredibly helpful to my work, and to my thinking and to my growth. And I thank you tremendously for it. And your essay about my work, Waiting With, in your book is brilliant. So thank you. I prepared a very short presentation here. So I'm going to read it, okay? Never has waiting been such a loaded term as it is now. Waiting, waiting to get tested, waiting for my test results, waiting for a hospital bed, waiting in supermarket lines, waiting for my unemployment check, waiting for a vaccine, waiting for things to go back to normal. In these times, hospitality and our connection to others is of prime importance. Our survival, in every sense, depends on it. Currently, hospitality and connection with others is being encouraged as of its supreme importance while still maintaining physical distance, isolation, masking. Virtual presence is part of pandemic hospitality. So this is our new kind of hospitality. It's pandemic hospitality. Presently, most art can only be experienced virtually, online, cerebrally, rather than haptically. The embodied senses are subsumed into text and virtual images and experiences, like kissing through glass. Performance art has been defined as live art or life art, art into life, life as art, not an imitation of life. In this pandemic existence of physical isolation and restriction, waiting and waiting with has become a central daily activity, behavior, requirement for survival. How then do we embrace and encounter what this enforced performance demands of us? How can we practice virtual welcome, hospitality, engagement? And this Zoom call is a practice, so it's part of that. It's been interesting to see the amazing creativity. Is my time over?
No, go ahead.
It's been interesting to see the amazing creativity of so many people who are finding new ways to connect and to communicate. Much of it is by virtual means, as our Zoom call shows. But the real life performances people are engaging in show vast possibility of new ways of engaging with others and performing sociality. In your book, in Iruna's book, essay on waiting with, Irina has dug into the ways in which waiting, when done as an act of hospitality, asks something of the other in return. Waiting with is not a power play, but rather an act of hospitality and of solidarity. I wait with you now, and thank you for waiting with me.
Beautiful, Faith. Thank you very much. I'm glad we made it happen, even if not on Zoom.
Great, thanks, Faith. Okay, so next, Kathy. Hi.
Hello. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. So let me just get that happening for a second. Great. Are you seeing this? Can you see something shared?
Yes, we can, Kathy.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So this is the chapter that Irina wrote about an old work of mine called Hosting the Animal. And Irina, I have to thank you so much, along with all the things that Anna and Faith said about the importance of your book and how beautiful it is. But also, I really have to thank you for including the animal in this discussion, non-human, because I think that we really, especially in this pandemic moment, can see the effects of what our both social and environmental injustices have done to all creatures. And so this is an important inclusion in this conversation, and I deeply thank you again, as Faith said, for our conversations, but also for thinking this through with me. I also am deeply indebted to past artists who have looked at working with animals. For example, this incredible piece by Joseph Beuys I Like America and America Likes Me, which is an older work where he locked himself up for 3 days in a gallery with a coyote. And there are many things that Boyce would have said about this coyote, but one of the things that struck me was the way that this coyote is kind of a forgotten animal, an animal who's wily, who's unwelcome. And this is the thing that I think we also have to consider, is not just the kittens and the puppies and the ponies, but the animals who are kind of discarded often and thought of as unwanted. And this extends obviously to the human animals as well. Eduardo Kac is also someone who I'm indebted to because of his work with transgenic animals, with this GFP bunny, Alba, in 2000, where he introduced this notion of transgenics, where human DNA is, and other species DNAs are admitted into the genomic system of the animal. So the bunny here has some jellyfish genes in it so that it can express this incredible color under UV light. And Eduardo was not able to bring his animal home. And so I moved into this project, Embracing Animal, thinking about trying to bring these lab model animals home. What does it mean to work with a scientific product? And this is what I did with this project over a couple years. This is Echo the rat, who is a transgenic rat bred by the pharmaceutical companies to develop drugs for people with immune disorders, such as my own. It was a kind of reverse engineering. I have to say that Irina points this out in the article beautifully. I was so naive coming into this project. I probably wouldn't have done it if I had known what was ahead, perhaps, but that's how you enter a lot of projects, I think. And this project taught me so much, particularly about the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industry, and on whose backs we are all benefiting, including the millions of unseen, invisible animal models. These animals were put into one of the exhibitions at Mass MoCA that Irina speaks about, in an extensive kind of penthouse housing situation where I did try to keep in mind their needs. It was a kind of compromise all the way around. They were out of the lab, but they couldn't be completely released. This quote from Donna Haraway, where she talks about the onco mouse, a cancer-bearing mouse, as her sibling and her perhaps sister, became important to me as I was thinking about these rats, as they were bearing the genes of the human DNA of diseases much like my own, and the kind of suffering that I literally could witness on their bodies, and trying to comfort them as best I could. They were literally products. So they're animal models, they're workhorses for science. They were incredible invention. This is one of the first models, the HLA B27, and it was first made in 1990. I was very interested, as I did this project and entered into it, in the politics of empathy and care. And I think that all of that Irina understood so much and extended in this text, and in the texts that you've written in general, and ways you've spoken about this project, both to me and publicly, Irina, because you've kind of made the politics of what it means to take in these forgotten animals, these invisible workers, as something that's important that we all consider and keep in mind, particularly as we go forward now in this pandemic moment too. It's a love story. It was a love story. And that's something I think Irina also really addressed beautifully. One example of that, besides my own love that I developed for these rats that were completely frightening to me at first, was by the night watchman at Mass MoCA, where the rats spent 10 months of their lives. And he would come in, and since I didn't change the circadian rhythm of the rats, he brought them treats and toys and played with them every night, and ended up asking if he could take them home after the exhibition. And he took 2 of the rats home with him, and they ended up living with him till the end of their lives. So I thank Irina for bringing all of this to everyone's attention. And I hope that this book circulates widely, because I too think it's really timely and important. Thanks, Irina. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Okay, next up, Mathusen.
Um, can you see me?
Yes,
Um,
we can see you.
can you see the screen?
Not yet.
Okay. Wait a second. Screen. Okay. Sure.
Okay, yeah, now we can.
So I quickly went through the book, the PDF of this book, and where I found some words. So two things definitely kind of caught my eyes. One is like that Irina's been focused on my practice, where she says like, though the book is about the hospitality, but mine is like how that withdrawn, the, the, the when the welcoming is withdrawn. Another, in a very interesting way, I found that email when we are invited for this Zoom. There are two things that, again, kind of moved me. One was that the host will unmute when your turn will come, when you'll be present. And another thing, I was actually introduced first a word called Zoom boom. I was really not aware about that, which I thought like a real radical hospitality um, icon, and today's time, especially. So, how do you go the next slide? So I use "un" in my vocabulary as a narrative trope. So, and that is how my whole radical hospitality expand in multiple, kind of lanes. So here I really, really want to thank you, Irina. In India, um, our Indian culture, like relationships are paramount, you know. So when we really want to thank someone, we still don't really have a vocabulary for it. We just don't know how to say it in words. Even the children, they don't thank their parents instead of parents doing everything for them. So I grew up with this culture of not thanking anybody verbally. It is something that we feel. It is something that we share silently. So when I thought of thanking formally to Irina or this book, I really had no word. But all I want to say that Irina, in last 15 years, and with her book, really made me feel again the purpose of life. That why I'm living, because in today's time, in this whole lockdown and this pandemic, when we are sitting in the age of life and death with a lot of internal and external crises, this book, when I read it, when I look back 15 years ago, our relationships, I just found that yes, I can live again. So to tell a little bit of my practice, I have my own world. I have my own kids, plants, animals, everything. I choose them. I'm quite a control freak. So Irina is there. And Irina, to me, is again with this Indian culture, we don't thank people who are an extension of ourselves, who are our family. She, from the beginning of our relationship till our next life, I believe, she's a part of my life. We are growing together and we need each other. It's a family need and we demand it. We are quite impolite about demanding our rights from our family. So this is where I first met Irina. My project, It's Good to Be Queen, where Irina came, and we both were very new in New York. And the project was about, to me, it was like about Welcoming Stranger, where I actually opened a couple of months of my staying in Chelsea to friends, passers-by, viewers, on like strangers, everybody. Again, I'm going back to the Indian culture where our biggest myth or a phenomena is called, in Sanskrit, it's called Atithi Deva Bhava, means guest is God. And the most disturbing little narrative or the story from that myth I found was, you offer your guest everything, regardless, including you offer your wife to your guest for the best service. That disturbed me. That made me question about the, authorship of someone's, anyway. So I started challenging my guests instead of welcoming my guests. So I became a little uncomfortable being the best host. So this apartment for 2 months, more than 2 months, I made hundreds of guests and I treated them individually very well. But on my opening day, my first opening night in New York, I left my opening, leaving the whole apartment for everyone, making everybody disappointed and upset. If you read the book, you will see how Irina herself felt about it. She drove for 6 hours to attend these things. And I left 2 albums behind, which Irina said that we sat on a pressed in white couch in front and they were looking at. And the line made me really sad was when she could not find her image in this book. So hundreds of guests I used to take in a selfie mode of picture before they were leaving. It was much before the selfie was invented. And so when I read Irina's book recently, I could not believe that she was not there. And during lockdown, I drove to my studio. I found my 2 albums, which most probably Irina in that opening night saw only one piece. I found this. This was when me and Irina met first. And Irina, today I have to tell you, these 2 albums I dedicate to you because of you, I got to know what radical hospitality means and the power of the hospitality in every way. So, and the other project Irina mentioned was after 11 years of this 2006 It's Good to Be Queen, was in Los Angeles, and it was called Unhome in City of Angels. So for 2 months I used social media as my medium and I started feeding. I opened another account. I am quite active in this social media, using my aunt as a trope. So like next 2-3 months I started feeding, making my follower, subscriber, consumer dreaming about what is happening. Even made them paid to come for the exhibition through that Eventbrite or something. So everything was like happening. And at the last moment, like half an hour before the opening, I sent them messages about the change of venue. And I brought them all in a park where I was sitting alone and no artwork. So it's good to be queen, and 11 years after 2017, on home in city of Angels, actually I took one component for the total package of the art and artist myth. So a lot of time I actually raptured that the notion of hospitality in many ways. One was like my first online project, which is still running, Free Me Too, where the artworks were happening a lot, and selling, and commercial galleries doing it. I offered people free artwork in an exchange of a love letter. And for last couple of years, I'm trying to play the politics of myth making and unmyth that myth in different ways. Mostly I'm creating contracts like an artist manifesto and making a huge, big, tangible kind of works, which is right. But the main, and I also, in one of my contracts, I call all of my tangible form of artworks are byproducts. So the main products are the contracts, where I can say anything and everything. And this is the end. I still want to be a successful artist. And I'm sending this to the curators all over the world, whomever I'm finding online. So Irina, this is all for you, and I love you. Without you, my life is little meaningless.
Thank you, Mithu. Thank you so much. Okay, so next up we have Ken Aptekar.
Okay. So I'm thrilled to be part of this discussion, conversation, and to be a part of Arrested Welcome. Wonderful. I'd like to show three works that were included in my exhibition project, Nachbarn, Neighbors, that Irina wrote about so insightfully. That exhibition, organized and proposed by Thorsten Rodig at the St. Anna Museum in Germany, was for me a politically pressing matter and drenched in the desire for people to trust each other and feel welcome in a world that hasn't wanted you. Hold on, you can keep that image on the screen now for a while. Besides the narrative series about the Karlebach family, which was the centerpiece of the exhibition and which Arrested Welcome focuses on, there was a series of 20 silver point drawings, of which you're seeing one here, with texts sandblasted on glass over them. The texts on the glass convey messages related to communicating with neighbors and formally resemble the scrolls pictured in altarpieces on view in the St. Anna Museum in Lübeck, Germany, where the exhibition took place. These scrolls in the original paintings had the words of a prayer on them or the name of a patron, but I've eliminated those words in my renderings in silver point. In my drawings, the texts were either in Russian, German, or Turkish, reflecting the diverse population in Lubeck, and specifically addressed my audience for this exhibition. The drawings extended the idea of hospitality under duress introduced in the Karlbach narrative series to present-day Lubeck. The paintings that I had made told about what happened in 1941 to a Jewish family in Lubeck, the Karlbachs, a dynasty of rabbis, one of whom headed the Lubeck synagogue before he was murdered by the Nazis. Borrowing Christian imagery from the altarpieces, I engraved a story in glass over my paintings to focus on a welcoming act of kindness in a moment of terror. But to come back to these silver point drawings, they raise questions about how insiders might better understand and welcome outsiders in their midst. I wanted to highlight the cultural differences between the groups as a way of opening conversations across racial and religious divides. In the Nazi era, those divides led to scapegoating and murder. So what you're looking at here is a drawing in German that says, I'll translate for you, "Your dog shit again in my kid's sandbox." A message one can easily imagine one neighbor communicating to another. Can we have the next? Okay, this one is in Turkish, and it says, "Don't choose which house to buy, get a good neighbor." And the idea of this text came from somebody I met and worked with in Lubeck, who was the head of the Turkish Muslim community in Lubeck. And he gave me quite a few pieces of advice offered to Muslims in the Quran. And this was one of them. So this is actually from the Quran. And then the next one, Irina, you'll be able to say this probably in Russian, but I'll give you the English. It's Sasha, come on over. I baked some delicious rolls. And this phrase, this statement came from a number of, I spoke to a number of Russian immigrants in Lubeck who constituted the Jewish community there because they were basically wiped out in the Nazi era, and the new Jewish community was all Russian refugees who had come to Lubeck. And I spoke to them and met some and found out how in the course of their daily lives they communicated with each other across the fence and as neighbor to neighbor. So this gives you a little sense of what that component of the exhibition Nachbarn was. Anyway, reading Irina's timely and compelling book, I realized that the surging Black Lives Matter protests now have everything to do with the arrested welcome of Africans in America dating back to 1619. And my project in Germany that proposed kindness and respect in place of hatred and fear, accepting difference instead of demanding conformity, and above all, talking openly and honestly to one another, were not only prescriptions for neighborly cooperation, but essential elements notably lacking in our current political situation. We're lucky to be witnessing today, I feel, a powerful and growing revolt against social structures that have developed during centuries of refusals to welcome Blacks and Jews and Muslims and women and those identifying as LGBTQ and anyone really who could be blamed for the failures of straight white men. If we are lucky enough now to get rid of the current lawless and hate-filled administration, we'll have the sorrows and anger, resistance and hope of Blacks in this country to thank. For now, though, I'll thank Irina Aristarkhova for her terrific book.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Ken. Okay, so next up we have remarks from Stamps Gallery. So, and I'm going to actually kick that off. So I'll take 5 minutes for thoughts on the book, and then turn it over to Stamps Gallery Director and Curator Srimoyee Mitra. So the way that I wanted to position my remarks today is at a point of convergence between some ideas that Irina addresses in her book and my personal areas of interest. In juxtaposition to the work that I do at Stamps Gallery. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm the Outreach and Public Engagement Coordinator at Stamps Gallery. And I primarily work on public programs. The work I've been doing at Stamps Gallery pushes me to explore what outreach and public engagement means and what interactions and interfaces with the public look like from an institutional perspective, especially within an institution such as Stamps Gallery, whose commitment to social justice shapes the work that we do. At the gallery, there's a strong emphasis on dialogue that encourages relooking and reimagining what an art institution is and examining how the art institution can and does function in the 21st century. Programs we have done have asked questions such as, what is the role of art, design, and the institution in affecting social and political change? Which leads to other questions about who is welcome in the art space and how do we welcome? A question that guides my work is, excuse me, how does the art institution live the values of the art that it shows, and what is its responsibility to do so? Essentially, the question looks at the ideals exemplified by an institution's programs and how those square with the institution's organizational, structural, and planning processes that keep it running. So with this, I wanted to focus on chapter 3 from the book, which is titled The Man Who Welcomes, Li Mingwei, where Irina discusses Li Mingwei's work, The Living Room, which is an interactive participatory installation that is filled with furnishings, plants, live birds, and refreshments with the intent of giving visitors the opportunity to participate in a process of exchange and hospitality, which is now a permanent installation at the Isabella Gardner Museum in Boston. So to quote from the book, quote, "The living room exemplifies the lasting and expanding impact of Li's hospitality as his work has moved from his own personal impact with regard to individual hosting to permanent installations, public spaces, and institutions. This new scale in Li's work opens up the art world to the question of institutional hospitality. The living room reimagines previously elitist and exclusionary spaces as democratic." From that, I wanted to pull out this idea or question of institutional hospitality and Irina's idea of institutional hospitality being successful when it takes on a democratic nature. So again, from the book, quote, "Democratization of a museum," Li shows, "can be achieved through the creation of a welcoming place for others, those who do not know what they are looking at in a typical Western museum of art, and those who feel intimidated and alienated by museums in general, especially those presenting contemporary art," unquote. I praise Mingwei's work in pushing the institution out of its comfort zone. His ideas and execution are art at its best, both in its proposition and intervention. Both Mingwei and Irina, through their work, are rightly and profoundly raising questions around what it means for institutions to be hospitable and welcoming and how that is being defined. But this isn't just the job of the artist or the scholar. It's also the job of the institution itself. As Irina points out further in the chapter, quote, "It takes many people to make a museum space welcoming, more than one artist whose temporary position is precarious," unquote. I feel that the artists, by creating installations and work like this, at times create a way out for institutions that show it. By exhibiting the Living Room project that again, quote, reimagines previously elitist and exclusionary spaces as democratic, unquote, has Isabella Gardner Museum done enough in proving that it is democratic or that it shares the values that it is a welcoming space for others? Is the art institution a reflection of the work that it shows? So one may argue that the Isabella Gardner Museum went above and beyond by making the living room a permanent installation, and maybe they did, but as a whole, American art institutions have not done enough. Art institutions cannot say we are doing enough by just showing the work that is hospitable, but instead need to embody the hospitality that Ming Wei's The Living Room Project seeks to offer. The art institutions needs to do this on multiple organizational levels in clear, transparent ways and be open to critique. The institution can start by asking questions of itself, such as, how do we create more one-on-one audience gallery interactions? How do we create a space where when the audience walks in, everyone feels equal? How are guests acknowledged when they come to this space? How do we think about different modalities of comfort? And how do we expand our understanding of cultural notions of comfort and hospitality? And that's it from me. So thank you. And now I will turn it over to Stamps Gallery Director and Curator, Srimoy Mitra.
There you go, I'm unmute. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Irina, and to all the artists for being here and sharing your fantastic work with us. It is truly an honor and a privilege for us to host this fantastic book launch. So thank you to the artists, Irina, the author, and of course to all of you from the public who have joined us virtually. So I guess I will share my screen and I will do that first. Okay, I'll do that first. All right. Share. Do you all see the screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So I thought it would be helpful, you know, for the wider public to have some images about where we are and who we are. So Stamps Gallery is part of the Penny W. Stamps School of Art and Design at the University of Michigan. We are located in downtown Ann Arbor on 201 Division Street. As you can see, we have a wonderful, we have a lot of windows. We are located in an 8,000 square foot, approximately 8,000 square foot retrofitted retail space. So the building, you know, what's unique about us and the gallery is that we are part of the university, but we are not housed specifically on campus. Of course, this is considered a university, you know, we're functioning within the guidelines and operations of the university, but we also have, you know, we are a public space, and our immediate audience and our neighbors are actually in a commercial sort of office corporate building, which leads itself to a number of, you know, a range of folks and audiences who walk through. A little bit, Stamps Gallery is an incubator and lab for contemporary artists and designers who explore ideas and who, sorry, is incubator and lab for artists and designers to test ideas and a commitment to social justice. Reading this book brought me back to one of the first exhibitions that we organized at Stamps Gallery called Vital Signs. Vital Signs for a New America, that brought together sort of three artists' projects that invited folks to participate. In thinking about as we are starting a newer gallery, Stamps Gallery in its current iteration is a newer, in its current iteration is a newer institution where we are where our positions are all new, and we are starting a new program with vital signs, and so the idea of I've just pulled out a couple of important quotes, because this book I found was very much in line with all the thinking that we have been doing at the gallery in thinking about our role in society. What is the role of a contemporary art gallery and a museum in the 21st century as we function as a Kunsthall, a testing space where for experimental projects. So this work, Vital Signs, this work by Dylan Mina, who is a Métis artist based in Michigan, Lansing, Michigan, I thought was a very appropriate and important work to start our exhibitions, thinking about and considering our indigenous histories and the land on which we are located. So Dylan, this work, Elders Say We Do Not Visit Anymore, set up a tea room at the gallery where we invited folks, where he, on the opening night and on various sessions, he hosted sessions where people could drop by and drink tea and chat. And then we also worked with different students and student organizations at U of M, as well as Eastern Michigan, to come and host sessions of their that they wanted to with tea and invite their friends and colleagues. Another project by Cheryl O-Ring was write a postcard to the president, I wish to say, the project was called I Wish to Say, where she set up a little office working room area where she sat with a typewriter and invited folks to, the gallery opened in 2017, shortly after the 2016 election, to sort of share their message with the president. And that's Cheryl there. This picture has been taken from outside, where she was collecting messages to the president, which then eventually was also she ultimately, the postcards that she collects with messages then get mailed out to the White House. And to date, she has sort of mailed about 4,000 postcards. So I'll talk a little bit, say a couple of words about myself before opening it up to some questions and about the gallery. So my approach to selecting artists and as a curator acknowledges the intergenerational and cultural losses endured through colonial and racial violence in North America that marginalize women, queer, indigenous, and racialized communities from all walks of life, including the art world. So how do we, what is the role of art and design, and along with that, the role of the institution in creating a welcoming space, a space where we can catalyze social change, the art as has been acknowledged through the different artists' works in the book, is always, and I quote, is always created within a specific cultural and political context. And so for us as a newer institution, part of the University of Michigan, the strategy has been to really think about who we are and where we are, what are the histories, and how do we develop programs that can acknowledge these intergenerational and ongoing losses through colonial and racial violence. Working with artists such as Dylan Minor, indigenous artists, as well as in a subsequent exhibition that we did where we've just started scratching the surface with the history of the civil rights movement in Ann Arbor. So having a place-based focus to sort of start and build our program and our wider audiences, and through that then begin to establish dialogues perhaps more nationally and internationally. And so with this in mind, I leave you with the four sort of key questions that we ask ourselves through the programs, through our exhibitions and programs, and which I found also, I was continuously thinking about them and gleaning answers through the book, is how can art institutions better support and build a robust, inclusive society? As we say, our work is informed by concerns of social justice and sort of urgent, the urgent needs that our society is dealing with. One is the ongoing crisis of statelessness of migrants and refugees, the foreigner, paired with the questions of the urgency of climate change that has created, continues to create havoc. How does our dependence on technologies, in particular, like artificial intelligence, inform and shape and transform contemporary art practices? And finally, what can we learn from decolonial feminist and feminist art practices that can continue to consistently disrupt our ongoing, the hierarchies that are implicitly built within art institutions. So with that, I can stop the screen share now and open it up perhaps to any questions or conversation.
Great. Excuse me. Actually, there was a great question that came in that I'm going to send to Irina. Irina, did you get the question that I just sent to you?
Yes, and thank you, Jennifer. Thank you again, everyone, for being here and for presenting this amazing, giving amazing remarks, which also I think the question refers to some of that in a way. The question states, seems to me that the notion of hospitality holds a complex relationship to friendship. This comes across in the book, most notably in the discussions of work by Mitu Sen and Liming Wei. I'm interested to hear any of the artists and Irina's thoughts about that relationship. Indeed, and I think the question, if I may disclose, came from Can, and I imagine that in the chapter about the work, about your work, and also in the chapter about many artists' works, one of the reasons why I wrote this book is because I realized that there are so many layers which are invisible in a way, ephemeral, as in hospitality itself, but those layers are only revealed through giving time. And it's this notion of giving time, that intensity of a relationship which is hidden. And from one chapter to another, I feel that my writing has become, in a way, and that's the form of writing which I searched for, the reason why the book has been rewritten two or three times, because there was a need to find a form which would both be somewhat giving due to that time together, and the time that the projects took to come to fruition on the one hand, and on the other hand, to still preserve a certain level of restraint. This is where I've been thinking a lot about how it's not about revealing, it's not about simply revealing private. And I appreciate this question because so much about friendship or relationship that, for example, Kathy Hai created, right, with non-humans, so much about it is private, right? And how does one translate it into, translated or find forms for it, which would be respectful of the unsaid and something that potentially wants to and needs to remain private. So indeed here the friendship is also care, I think, and but today's event for me at least, it's that acknowledgement that it's a huge part, I think, of a contemporary writer writing about contemporary art. So I would like to ask if any artists would like to say something about that too, the relationship that you find between hospitality and friendship. And can others hear me well? Before we move to another, to others, I would just want to add that for me, and I hope that the book reveals that it's not a gloss over of difficulties of friendship. It's certainly not a gloss over of all the vulnerabilities on the one hand, but also structural inbuilt barriers to what hospitality can become. Thank you.
Can I say something? This is
all right.
Hello?
Faith Wilding would like to say something on my phone. Go ahead, Faith.
Thank you, dear friend, for lending your phone. Yeah, I just want to kind of underline and stress this very amazing connection that Irina has allowed to me and to others to have these kinds of conversations about the work, about our work, and about the process of the work, and in a way that I've never had with anybody else, that kind of conversation. And it's something that artists really appreciate and really yearn for. I think that our work isn't just privatized, but that it is a conversation. It hopes to be a conversation. It hopes to open up areas that one can't perhaps even discuss without seeing these, without making this work, and through the work that one's making, trying to talk about things that you can't really just say or just make happen outside of this realm of this kind of language that art gives us, and not just verbal language, of course. So just want to really thank Irina and also all of the other artists, many of whom I know and whose work I know, It's been a real honor. It is a real honor to be in the same book with you guys.
Thank you so much, Faith. I believe that a couple of people have written to me that the beginning was not of the conversation did not appear properly. So the question was about relationship and the role of friendship in hospitality and in making this possible.
Did any of the other artists want to respond to that question before we move on to the next question? Oh, Srimoyi, go ahead.
I'll let Kathy respond first.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. I appreciate it. I likewise will just echo what Faith just said, because I too have felt that the kind of ways that you are trying to understand these works is exceptional and not really practiced so much in this art world, because I think that a lot of these works exist kind of outside of a commercial world per se, because we are not trying to keep up with this kind of production, and there's a kind of slow time that is observed by many of these works that is difficult, I think, for institutions to embrace. I think that's one thing that you particularly, not just the friendship and the sort of looking into the private and what goes behind the works. We're in this moment where we're really observing a slowing down of time. We're all having to figure out, like, how can we deal with ourselves in our isolation if we have that privilege, and also we need to slow down, otherwise things will just explode, as we've already seen. And so, we are now faced with an opportunity, I think, to begin to look at this possibility, to think about these projects as a real way forward for everyone. So I think, again, your book is really timely, as people have said, because of the fact that it begins to introduce this other alternative sense of how to embrace works and also how to embrace time. So thank you for that.
Okay, I'll jump in very quickly. One of the things I really appreciated as I was reading about hospitality is also really thinking about its relation to inclusivity. And within this, from an institutional context, how do we create an inclusive space, and what does that really mean? Is what I through this, through each of the artists' work, this. Through the motive or the impetus, through care, right? And so how, from an institutional perspective, I found that really interesting in terms of not only care through our programs and the works that we're developing and initiating, but also care and friendship, that evolves as we work together, right? So this idea that we are actually all in relation with sort of one another, whether as staff, as colleagues, there's a friendship, there's a camaraderie, the friendship between the artist and curator, artist and writer, curator, the fact that we are part of an ecology, right? And I really felt that that the book, it really, and so can we create, how do we make it a sustainable ecology of friendship and care that can then perhaps begin to dismantle these, these sort of hierarchies, these linear hierarchies of privilege. That's my response.
And then I think Mithud, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I almost forgot what I was. Yeah, about this friendship and relationship, right? For me, I don't. It's not about the language, but this kind of categories of friendship, relations. This vocabulary also I don't subscribe. For me, it is the connection. It is definitely, like that where our cognitive brain tell us about the, the definition of each category or each, that the notion of each things. I, I, I feel like, I'm hesitant about consuming those definitions. I just feel like, wherever I feel that connection and wherever it happens, like, like kind of a sensory, but also like a post-cognitive state of mind where I feel that strength and that area, some kind of a relationship happens and connection happens, whether it's a plant or animal or human being, and we create that connections, and for that connections we don't need any, yeah, I mean, I cannot frame them in any kind of formalities, and I want to run my life like this without without following all those jargons of and then the terms and things. I just feel like with Irina, I mean, the moment I met her and then slowly that last 15 years we developed without aiming anything, like, yet, and it just flow. It is kind of that, I would say, like, rather it's that feminist way of becoming. We are constantly, we are evolving, becoming, and it is life. It is where I feel that energy and that spirit, and and everything together, and that is whatever it's friendship, relationship, bonding, trust and faith and myth and everything. So this is all I can express, and yeah. So, and it always works.
Thanks, thank you.
Did anyone else want to respond to this question before we move on to the next questions? Okay. So, Irina, there's another question in the chat from Patricia Zimmerman. Do you want to take that question?
Yes, thank you. The question is on the pandemic and how does it recalibrate the tenets and operations of radical hospitality. Thank you for the question. And indeed, when the book started, it was some time back in time, as you can imagine, and the particular current moments, they continuously recalibrated my perception of what it responds to, right? What these topics are relevant for, or how does one respond to the currency of the current moment. The pandemic, of course, when the pandemic was unveiling, I spoke to a friend of mine who is also a book coming out, who said that I feel as if this is not relevant anymore, right? Our books are not relevant anymore. And two things I would like to say. One is that I feel that changed, right? How one felt in March and February, and something which Ken Aptica spoke to, how we are in a different moment already now. I believe that that particular it changed in the relation to what's happening out of there. That's one. And the second I would like to say is that I was reluctant, and that's why I mentioned Zaki Eman Jackson's launch, is because I never thought of an event like this, like today, right? So I would love to be present. I would love to be physically present with you, right? Very differently. On the other hand, this would not be possible, and right. So in a way, what enable what we have today, and I'm going back to this notion of giving time, is to work extra hard, and I think some of you already mentioned it, of being present. So I believe the recalibration is one word about it. Another word about it is, strategizing, or presenting ourselves, or finding ways to be present for each other um, in ways which we have not necessarily been comfortable with before. And I appreciate the effort that you have shown today. And like I always get very exhausted after you know, actually the physical is always preferred in my mode of being, but that is currently all I can say. There is another question here, which I will, and also I want to say that the questions which are coming, I hope that I will write a blog post about it for Minnesota and try to answer them. There is a question from Eddie Shanken about a relation to, and also Sergey, right? One is, both questions I believe are about other types of situating this topic, right? Whether it's a topic of friendship in relation to hospitality, there are histories of friendship, of course, Foucault is one of them, or the relationship of hospitality in art to relational aesthetics, right? And I believe that it's been a lot of great surveys written on very general sense on hospitality in contemporary art. Stephanie Smith did excellent collection. So did Paul de Mella and other authors here. So my interest was in zooming in on one particular going deeper into one particular aspect, and that and one particular notion and one particular practice. So I guess the book came out of what I started with today in my introduction, of a certain impatience with theory, and a certain impatience with a certain kind of writing, because I have seen practices around me which just blew my mind, and I decided to write about them. Would anyone else like to say something or ask another question?
Okay, well, and we're also getting close to the end of our event. So yeah, I guess maybe we can even open it up to you know, if any of the artists or Irina, if anyone has sort of closing remarks or any ideas that, you know, they want to give us as we sort of continue our day, start our week.
One of the great things about Zoom meetings, which I discovered, is that this ending on time works really well. So I'm very happy. Thank you all for being here. And before Jennifer presents final remarks, but for our incredible, I think, event and conversation, I'm congratulating myself already here. As you can see, thank you again to the artists, and thank you to the STEMS Gallery.
I just wanted to say, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You should be congratulating yourself, Irina. We should all be congratulating ourselves. But I was thinking throughout, and I also really like this idea of being sort of impatient with theory. And I was thinking about this term of radical hospitality, which you were the first one to introduce in my practice. And I was thinking that what I think is so interesting and important about it is that it's sort of the opposite of virtue signaling. Like there is a commitment to it and a different way of relating, which I think is really, really important. The other thing I wanted to say is that I've been thinking a lot about our conversations, because actually like seeing the video of the line and people close together made me really uncomfortable because it's unacceptable now. But I just finished a new video which will be about how to demonstrate joy and warmth from afar. So I have stuff to talk to you about.
Jennifer, do you want to wrap up?
Yes. Yes, thank you. Okay, so yeah, thank you again, Irina, all of the artists, and for all of you for joining us for this book launch today. Today is just the beginning of the conversation around topics raised in this book. We invite you to continue this conversation with Irina on many other platforms and in various forms in the future. Please share the links that we posted earlier in the chat featuring various platforms to access the book. And thank you again for joining us today. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.